All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to guide you through this topic of literature searching and critical appraisal of the health literature as it relates to primary care literature, as that's our focus here. In my previous role at McMaster, like Casey mentioned, I worked for the Health Information Research Unit, where we built and managed evidence-based literature services which perform the difficult work of both literature searching and critical appraisal, pointing end users to high-quality sets of literature. So I'm going to discuss these and their effective use a little further along in the presentation. So the concept of evidence-based medicine, or EBM, I'm sure many are familiar with it. It was coined here at McMaster, you might not know that, and has the aim of applying scientifically supported evidence to clinical practice. One of the definitions of EBM on this slide is EBM is defined as the conscientious, explicit, and judicious use of current best evidence in making decisions about the care of individuals. It means integrating individual clinical expertise with best available clinical evidence from systematic research. So that derives from a paper from Sackett and colleagues, the evidence-based gurus themselves. So still, there's other topics in primary care that are not entirely focused on direct clinical practice and are best suited to a traditional literature search. And I'm going to outline some of the tips and approaches on how to filter and manage these types of citations. And in preparing this presentation, I was reminded about just how big this topic is. So I'll do my best to point you to some helpful material, tips, and links to tools that you can apply to your next research question. Also, although I wouldn't call myself an expert, I'd be really happy to assist you with any literature search, strategy development, and critical appraisal process to apply to your research retrieval. Okay, so as far as the presentation overview, I'm going to try to cover these following things. I've put it in question format, so why research literature, where to search, I'm going to cover off the typical health literature databases, what to search in terms of composing your search strategy, I'm going to touch upon how to critically appraise, filter, and select your results derived from your search retrieval. And I'm going to end on some evidence-based literature search services, those wonderful things that take a lot of the work out of it for all of us. So we're going to begin with why search the literature. Well, essentially, before embarking on your own search, it's important to determine whether your question's already been answered in full or even partially with another high-quality study. Review of the literature on your topic can also inform how you should go about conducting your own study by looking at their methods. And a thorough search of literature is going to, of course, support the background section, which is a requirement of most publications of a research study. And another angle at it might be a comprehensive or super comprehensive search, which is going to support a systematic review or a meta-analysis. And finally, you might want to search literature just to remain current and up to date with your discipline or your area of interest. The next quandary is where to search. So there's a plethora of places to search. Some are much better than others, and I'm going to outline today largely Medline by way of the PubMed browser, but I will note that Ovid Medline is another version of Medline Access. You might not be familiar with CINAHL. CINAHL is the Cumulative Index of Nursing and Allied Health Literature database. So if your question is focused in that milieu, you might point there first. MBA is another enormous health literature database, largely focusing on European work. We shouldn't forget gray literature too. This is a source of commission reports, government reports, dissertations, and theses that don't fall under the regular publication offerings. And even Google Scholar is not a bad place to start a search, especially if you have a fairly focused question. And what I found is that the Health Science Library, reviewing it, has an amazing assortment of resources. They can point you to these health literature databases with a direct link here, and their evidence-based section here is really comprehensive and gives you lots of tips and tools, and will point you to some of the other more processed resources that we'll talk about a little later in the presentation. Okay, just ruffle my papers here for a minute. So here's just a closer view of those screens. Let's see. So next on the docket is the question of what to search. So in this section of my presentation, I'm going to cover what to search and how to build a search strategy. We're going to discuss the question formulation, essentially the strategy development. What are background versus foreground questions and where to search for them? I'm going to review the PICO-T framework that helps build your search strategy. And I'm going to cover off both the selection of controlled vocabulary as well as free text terms that compose the strategy. And finally, I'm going to end with what are really useful tools called, well, they're PubMed search filters, and they come in various forms. Question type. It's good to take a pause before you launch into a search and think about what question you're actually trying to answer. So let's see. Right, so there's two main kinds. The background question might be you're seeking just simply a definition, understanding the pathology of disorder more, what are drug names to treat a collection of disorders, or what is the current clinical procedure on a given disorder. For these questions, I recommend, again, looking to the Health Science Library. They have actually an excellent collection of background information resources. And there you can delve into pathology, definitions, drug information, and resources that are going to be really well suited to answer those kind of questions. Foreground questions are another set altogether. They're the ones that lend more so to a true literature search in a health database. Qualitative questions are going to be asking about phenomena and individuals' perceptions and experience. Your quantitative questions, as you know, are looking for cause and effect relationships. They look at an individual or a group, and they're looking to define or measure defined outcomes and exposures. So the PICO framework is actually a really great way to start thinking about the concepts that are going to frame your literature strategy. So it's important to frame a good question. It's going to first focus your information needs. It's going to identify the search concepts that should compose your strategy. It's going to put you in the right direction of the best potential resource to answer your question. There's more information on PICO at this link. And furthermore, this chart sort of takes the PICO framework and then divides it amongst your types of study methodologies, so therapy, etiology, diagnostic, prevention, prognosis, and asks you questions about your population, your intervention or exposure, your comparator, your outcome. And in this model, they've added a T component for time frame. So another really useful tool to start framing your strategy. Furthermore, there's a template to really take advantage of taking out all the concepts in your strategy. So onward. Let's see. So with your PICO analysis performed and your question framed, your search strategy is ready for translation into an actual health database query. An appropriate health literature database to turn to is Medline. I think many of us are familiar with that. It's available by searching the PubMed by way of the PubMed browser or the Medline browser, as I mentioned. I'm going to demonstrate PubMed throughout the rest of this presentation and look at some of its useful tools at getting to the literature of interest for you. First off, I'll note, though, that there's several really great tools presented right on its home page. The PubMed tutorial, again, excellent for learning how best to apply search terms and tags and a strategy to get at a manageable set of literature. These other arrows I'm going to cover off in some amount of detail, including the single citation matcher, clinical queries, as well as the mesh database. Okay, so here is a demonstration of the single citation matcher. Maybe you guys already know about this, but sometimes it's the aha moment. So I have put in my credentials in terms of author name, and I put in a lovely search term in terms of the title. This harkens back to some work I did at Sunnybrook Hospital in microbiology, a life that I'm happy to have moved on from. When you click on search, essentially the next screen will present that very citation. If you have more information that you know about the citation, obviously you can put in some more details, but this is pretty unique right there. So off we go to some work I did on E. coli 157H7. There's another, I guess, really useful thing to know about PubMed. You don't have to be an expert searcher to hit PubMed. It has this great feature called automated term mapping. And essentially what it's going to do is take the search term that you put into the browser, and it's going to attach tags and compose a strategy that is most optimized for getting a large set of literature back. It's not going to be super specific, but it's a really good first go at finding out what's in PubMed on a given topic. I've got a strategy here, migraine headache, and this is the strategy that PubMed composed when just putting in those terms into the search field. Another great tip about PubMed is finding related articles. So the idea is if you find a good citation, you want to find more of them. PubMed has an algorithm that they run on that right-hand panel, and it will find you similar articles. It takes the index profile of the article that you have open, and it applies a search, and it's another good first stop at finding what you're looking for. So here is one of the recent articles that we found for the Hamilton Initiative study, which I'm going to refer to a little later on. It being a systematic review, it actually pulls up some other reviews, as well as original primary studies related to this topic. This is just another portion of the PubMed abstract. When you click on publication types or mesh terms, you can see what the full record looks like. Mesh terms are listed here, and your publication type indicated as review. That's just a good note to bear in mind when we explore this further. Okay. So, just situate on it. Okay, so controlled vocabulary, another really critical aspect in creating creating your search strategy. Control vocabulary useful to represent the concepts of your strategy for which can be expressed or spelled with variation, as presented in literature abstracts. So, if you will, atrial fib could be coined atrial fib, AFib, atrial fib, and then of course there's lots of UK spellings of clinical terms that have the weird O's and E's and such. So these terms are applied, or mesh terms are going to help you navigate to the singular representation of that concept. These terms are applied by professional indexers, however, they're still susceptible to subjectivity in their selection. A more focused search strategy includes the planned use of controlled vocabulary terms, and these are called in Medline medical subject headings or MESH. MESH are not added to Medline record instantly, however, so you have to keep that in mind that it may take over a period of weeks or even months for those terms to get onto a given Medline record. And generally, I'm going to demonstrate the MESH database and show its hierarchical arrangement. I'm going to show you its feature of scope notes, MESH major, its subheadings, and when entered into the search strategy, MESH terms, and MESH major and MESH. Okay, onward. Okay, so here is the MESH database. It's available by way of a link from the main PubMed page. This is the area where you put in your search term. So here in this demonstration, I've put in the term migraine headache. What I find is that it's been matched to the MESH heading migraine disorders. And here's the scope note to define exactly what migraine disorders encompass and the year introduced. Further down on the screen, you see this section of subheadings. So these are identifiers to further narrow the search within the main topic, migraine disorders. So if you were to click on diagnosis here and conduct your search, you'd be pulling up diagnostic studies on migraine headaches, obviously. The list gets quite long of subheadings and never fits on a full slide. These two sections here are also useful if you want to ensure that your literature retrieval is making migraine headaches the sole focus of the research study. You can click restrict to MESH major. The indexers at National Library of Medicine will give it a major tag if in fact it's a chief focus of the paper. And this just demonstrates how we went in with our migraine headache entry term and came out the other end with migraine disorders. Further along, we see the hierarchy with which where migraine disorders are displaced, and we see some other finer-grained, narrow child mesh, if you will, in case you wanted to narrow in on specifically migraine with the word, for instance, you could navigate to that mesh term. So to sort of drive, put the strategy in drive, you simply click the add to search builder and search PubMed, and out comes your results. You get a good number of hits, however, a little less than if you were using that automated term mapping strategy, as it's definitely more focused. How to use MESH major, those would probably be sliced in half in terms of volume. Okay. Okay. So the next important aspect of strategy building are text word terms, and these are really important where no mesh term exists, or you know it to be delayed in terms of getting on a body of literature. Certain journals lag getting their mesh terms more so than others. It's also important to apply text word terms to get at author use terminology. So again, harkening back to the Hamilton Initiative literature search, we arrived at the phrase ambulatory care sensitive conditions, or ACSC. So that is not a mesh term, so we definitely used that text term to plug in to our strategy. Text word tags are TW. Some other tips on the use of text words is you can use quotes to search a very specific phrase. You can use the asterisks to create some truncation. So hospital with asterisks, we'll call up hospitals and hospitalization with the S and Z, and hospitalized and all of those forms. A tag that I like to use around my text words is, I call it TIAB, T-I-A-B, and that's going to relegate the search just to the title and abstract of the Medline record. So here's just a review of some of the thought processes I put into the literature strategy for what was a call for literature that spoke to the phenomena as well as reduction in hospitalizations, acute care hospitalizations, and emergency department hospitalizations, and what role primary care can play in mitigating them. So when I started, reaching out into PubMed and used some of the easy features just to get a lay of the land, realized that across the globe, this concept of ambulatory care sensitive conditions that shouldn't otherwise be presented in hospital come with a variety of terms. So potentially preventable hospitalizations, I think, was a UK favorite, low acuity ED use, and so on and so forth. So you need to sort of keep all that in mind and compose your strategy with all those term phrases in mind. Some limited mesh was available to represent some of these concepts. You can see that in this column, whereas the text strategy really kind of drove this particular search. Again, this is just a quick demonstration of the use of the TIAB tag for migraine. Maybe not a great example. This comes in more handy when this term is going to be found in other parts of the Medline record, including author names. I've come across problems where, let's see, Hodgkin's, diseases and disorders that I have could plausibly be a surname, get mixed in with the author field. So at any rate, in institutions that might incorporate, the arthritis clinic or arthritis institute, blah, blah, blah. Let's see. Okay, next on the docket, let's see. Let's get notes. Pause. In. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to review search filters available to you in PubMed. Now, these filters are getting closer at arriving at true evidence-based medicine resources. So you can dive into PubMed and pull up all kinds of stuff. If you apply some clever filters, it's going to start directing you to high-quality, scientifically rigorous research. There is a very basic search filter that you can apply to kind of get at higher quality studies. I call it the PubMed Lite filter, or basic filter. It includes the idea that the publication piece has an abstract. It's in the English language, and it's focused on humans. You can adjust this date, but published in the last 5 years will certainly increase the currency of anything we treat. So here is a view of that same migraine search with the PubMed Lite filter attached to it up top here, and your searches go down considerably. Okay, another great filter that is posted right on PubMed and available by way of the link on this homepage is called Clinical Queries. This is actually the work of my previous group in Hiru, so I know a little bit about it, but it's interesting. They keep changing the presentation of how it works. The Hiru group empirically determined search filters that are going to get at different categorizations of literature. So the therapy type studies can be narrowed in on in PubMed in either in a broad capacity or a more narrow capacity by way of applying this search filter. As you can see, it mentions clinical trials and the random allocation and the idea of therapeutic use. And when the ease of applying this filter is great. So you just simply put in your search term on the clinical queries page, and then you hit search, and the results in terms of your therapy type study, if you pull this down, you can choose diagnostic, prognosis, and etiology studies and such, are going to be listed in this grouping here. Your systematic reviews are going to similarly be filtered by way of a systematic review filter in this section here. Okay. So, the next stop on my tour includes critical appraisal, which really came to be the title of the presentation, but I think that background information on how to get a body of literature in order to critically appraise was equally important. So I'm going to be discussing the tools that you can apply to your own critical appraisal, as well as tools that are systematically applied by different organizations with which to judge the merit of research studies. And you'll see how they apply grades and scores to their process. That's not quite in the right spot. Oh, maybe this. Sorry about that. Okay, so the other thing I want to talk about, just before I delve into critical appraisal, is sort of the last step in your process. And it's going to be summarizing your findings. This is the idea of bundling like studies together so you can adequately compare and contrast their bottom lines. You're going to be determining conclusions and hopefully writing summaries from what that literature tells you. And it's going to basically serve as the underpinnings of your background section of your literature paper, if that's where you're headed. I don't have time to talk about it in this presentation, but certainly tracking your references and putting them into EndNote is going to be a really useful next step. On that note of summarizing, again, just a quick peek at what we did with the Hamilton Initiative Literature Summary. When we pooled all our study and Dee went through and said yes, yes, no, no, we had a very manageable set of literature from which to summarize. And what I did is I looked at the types of studies. We had a big bundle of risk type studies, and then kind of divvied that up into things that talked about practice-based factors as opposed to provider-patient relationship, those that were simply just defining ambulatory care sensitive conditions, and then a pool of true intervention studies. Similarly, on the emergency department type of research, we dig these up into patient factors, again, a pool of interventions that took form of reviews in RCT, and one survey study. Okay, so now we're back to critical appraisal with a bit more of a deeper dive. So what I'm going to be talking about in this section is what's known as the evidence pyramid. I'm going to cover critical appraisal skills program, which was pointed out to me from Pam. I didn't know about this, possibly brainwashed from my last group and all things EPM stuff at high group. However, I'm going to also talk about high-risk critical appraisal inclusion criteria that they apply to their work, and a brief mention of GRADE. GRADE is the grading of recommendations, assessment, development, and evaluation. So here, excuse me, here is the famous evidence-based healthcare evidence pyramid 5.0. I thought pyramids were more static, but this one has gone through many versions and did the nice millennium spin of 5.0. It's published by Haynes and Alpers, and is really a useful way of visualizing what is evidence-based resources. So it's what it does essentially is it visualizes the hierarchical arrangement of evidence-based literature resources in terms of their level of processing and refinement to which the categories of evidence-based resources fall. So at the top you have systems, a little further with a little bit more processing, you get synthesized summaries and your guidelines and your systematic reviews follow, and then these are the last rung, which is the least processed in terms of evidence base, are your pre-appraised and appraised individual studies. So we'll just review this a little bit more. So this slide depicts how evidence processing actually occurs, beginning with the primary studies that can be broadly categorized by therapy, diagnosis, prognosis, differential diagnosis, and their contributions to what are the systematic reviews and even the guidelines. The final panel, you'll see, shows how, where you can find these resources and their fits within the evidence pyramid. And the notion that looking for answers at the top of the pyramid should be your first stop, followed by looking further down at the pre-appraised and then non-appraised research. Okay, here's a short summary of categories of evidence-based literature resources and where they fall within that evidence pyramid, and some examples of actual resources that you might be familiar with. Summary resources include UpToDate, and as well as the Canadian Task Force on Preventative Healthcare. Some pre-appraised resources include things like Cochrane reviews and the McMaster Plus database that I'm briefly going to touch on later. And the non-appraised research, that's the research that you have to put your own critical appraisal spin on, come from resources like PubMed, like we've looked at in detail. Then there's this other neat layer. It's kind of new. It's the idea of a federated search. And these include services that simultaneously search across the layers of these resources and categories and retrieve items from each layer that match to your particular search, where they exist, that is. I'm going to show you an example of that with the Mac Plus Federated Search service. Okay, so as I mentioned, CAS is actually one of the tools Pam pointed me to, and it's a good turn-to tool when the capacity to conduct your own critical appraisal of literature is needed. especially when one of the other evidence-based literature resources don't come up with your answer. So the Critical Appraisal Skills Program, it's offered out of Oxford University. It's led by professors Sir Muir Gray, he's another EVM guru from the UK. And it's got some really high utility for appraising literature that you might come across through PubMed. So, to dive in a little further, what they present on their website are these CAST checklists. They are organized by way of study type. So you have your systematic review checklist, your RCT checklist, and so on and so forth. I'm going to delve into the RCT trial checklist. And I'm going to go through this quickly because you can certainly take a look at it, download it, and probably, don't know if you can, I don't think you can enter it online, but possibly in paper form. You can tick away and figure out where your research quality lie. So the first set of questions in this checklist are basically screening questions to figure out whether you should really pursue this particular citation any further. Did the trial address a clearly focused issue? It gives you some pointers about how to think about this question in terms of population, intervention, comparator. You check the box and you proceed. There's another screening question: was the assignment of patients to treatments randomized? You can consider methodology of randomization in terms of concealment. And at this point, you pause and you say, well, yes, this particular piece satisfies these criteria, and I can continue or not. From here, I broke it down into the next grouping of questions. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but again, this resource is online, and it really does make a thoughtful approach to your own critical appraisal. So this next set, 3 through 6. Oops, I'm just going to go back. Are some, yes, what they call detailed questions. A lot about the patient's participants in the trial. And then this next set of questions refers to results and makes you critically think about how they're presenting results and whether they are robust. Okay, so as promised, I've also got high-risk critical appraisal as another go-to tool. The basics of high-risk critical appraisal are that essentially all the content is in English. They're about humans. The literature has to satisfy the notion that it's clinically important to practice. And the analysis of each article is consistent with the study question. In greater depth, and this is what a set of readers in higher will apply, and they no longer need to look at their cheat sheet. They comb through thousands of pieces of literature in a year. And for treatment studies, they look for these criteria. For diagnostic studies, these. Treatment, I think that, obviously random allocation of participants is key. With diagnostics, the presence of the gold standard is the critical piece. Again, you can reference these and apply them in your own way, as rigorously as your skills allow. There's criteria for differential diagnosis and prognosis. Clinical prediction guides have their own set of rules. Etiology studies similarly. And there's even a quality improvement and continuing education. Interesting to know that. their own set of criteria as well. Economics is the last study type for which they create criteria. Oh, no, systematic reviews and individual patient data and meta-analyses. So there you go, lots to chew on there. Grade. Quick mention about grade. Grade stands for grading of recommendations, assessment, development, and evaluation. There's a working group to support all this wonderful things that they present. It's widely seen as the most effective method of linking evidence quality evaluations to clinical recommendations. It serves as a common, sensible, and transparent approach to grading quality or certainty of evidence and the strength of recommendations. So this really applies to reviews and guidelines. So instead of just giving an entire review a score of quality, they take each outcome and they determine essentially what quality score could be derived from all the individual little studies that support a given outcome. The long and short of it is, when you're looking for, when you're doing a critical appraisal on your research retrieval results, look for the mention of grade ratings because it's an indicator of quality in a given systematic review or guideline. Lots of details on grade here. They use tables, they dissect the studies, they delve into how many people power the study in comparison, and then eventually the grade score is marked for 0. It's interesting to see that all the big EBM organizations have now adopted this, so everyone from WHO to Cochrane, up to date, they all apply this. So it's something to know is in the fittings of your evidence-based resources. Okay, so here is some evidence that I actually did work at the Health Information Research Unit. Just a note of what they were all about. The mission is toward improvement effectiveness and efficiency of healthcare by producing innovative and evidence-based information systems to help professionals, patients, policymakers, and the public. And in this area, you'll see, this is Brian Haynes, this is Anne McKibben. She is huge. She's Brian Haynes was the director and, led the ship for many years. Alfonso came in as the director just after him. Anne McKibben, incredible librarian, and did huge things in terms of establishing a unit in the early days. Nancy Lozinski was a great manager. So, and here's all the staff contributing. The major thing that this group does is they filter what is a ton of research by way of those critical appraisal filters. So 45,000 articles a year get whittled down by way of critical appraisal, and then some other filters related to sort of secondary peer review to just 20 articles per clinician on a given clinical discipline. So it's really quite amazing what they can achieve in terms of noise reduction. 99.9% in fact. The term flagship service of the group was called Evidence Updates. There's been a big shakeup, and EBSCO has moved in and it's been renamed as Evidence Alerts. The great thing is that this is a free service. You can all register. It's a really great view into a collection of research that's been pre-appraised, and if you set up a profile, you can select all primary care disciplines if you want to follow that research. You can be alerted to that research on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And Articles can be searched just by text word, and it's worth following. Even to start a literature search at this level is not a bad idea, because you'll get a few key pieces that you can then borrow concepts from and hit PubMed for a larger, more comprehensive search. The other product that comes out of this group is called MLIS Federated Search, and I referenced it earlier in the chat. This is one of those products that takes your search term and covers all levels of this pyramid to find the best matching resources. So again, you can sign up. It's free. And this is just a quick view of what an alert would look like coming out of the McMaster or MLIS Federated Search. My profile has a bunch of primary care tags on it, so you can see a copper review came in, as well as a JAMA article. When you click on those alerts, this is what the article records present to you. You have your classic citation, you have your link to the PubMed abstract, and then this is the bit of secondary peer review that's kind of special to this service. The article gets sent out to up to 4 or 5 practicing clinicians in these discipline areas, and then they give a score of relevance to practice and newsworthiness, so it helps further guide and filter this literature content to things that are clinically relevant. The PubMed abstract follows below, and then you get some comments from the clinical raters, so not just their scores out of 7, but also some text comments that help you determine whether this is a piece of literature worth delving into. One other study in that list was a geriatric out of the JM Geriatric Society, I think that is. Again, different set of disciplines, different set of physicians have looked at this, and the abstract, and more verbose comments that can really guide you in understanding the nuances of the article. Last slide. The last thing I wanted to leave you with is, you always have the option of browsing. You can do these targeted searches, but just staying up to date with the literature is always achieved by way of just browsing through some key journals. I just listed a few in family practice and family medicine that you can easily get to by way of the eJournals portal at the Health Science Library. And some references. The JAMA User's Guide to the Medical Literature, massive text, lots of chapters on, if you really want to delve into that in any detail, an excellent resource. Here's a link to CAS. Again, I borrowed from this chapter heavily, but this is the reference to the entire book. A link to GRADE, that evidence-based pyramids came from the citation, and the high-risk critical appraisal criteria can be found there. Thank you.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Earlier on, you talked about PubMed, PubMed Lite filter.
Yep.
Maybe I just missed that, but what exactly was that filter? Like, was that just like the term? It was like HABAP or something like that?
I call it PubMed Lite filter.
Oh, okay.
It's a filter, and you can compose. You can compose your own filter, but this one is Cochrane uses it as well.
Oh, so it's just like a string of.
It's a strategy to pair with a disorder or a concept that you're looking to serve.
Your conference is scheduled to end in 2 minutes.
It's actually on time.
So it's more of a thing you make up on your own rather than some of the other ones where you just clicked.
Well,
It was out.
there it is. So this portion here, if you were just to sort of copy and paste it into the mesh browser, it actually gets this many hits. So it whittles down the millions
Oh, okay.
of citations in Medline to this amount. And then when you pair that with any amount of other terms, it's going to narrow further. So
I see.
it accounts for all the itty bitty case studies and things about abstracts and comments and things that you really don't need to pay attention to when you're conducting a literature search for most purposes.
So like advanced search section, you maybe put that in the top line, the second line you put like random.
Yeah, but I didn't get a lot into the mechanics of search. Like it's a whole other talk.
Yeah.
But yeah, this string could be applied. I think it's here.
Then I can ask a second question. The grade rating you were talking about, is that like somewhere on, like is it on a standard place on articles, or is it like, will it say, where will it say what the grade rating is? Or is it different?
It's going to be mentioned right in the review, and then even in abstracts, I found when we were doing our literature review, they'll reference grade criteria.
Your conference is now over. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Yeah, it's quite transparent.
Okay.